Back in the early days of this project, we discussed how the launch day lineup for the Dreamcast inexplicably included two separate Formula 1 racing games, the deep but ruthlessly unforgiving MONACO Grand Prix, and the pleasant but bare bones kart Flag to Flag. MONACO Grand Prix looked nice, but was so insanely exacting in its difficulty that it was a miserable playtime experience. Flag to Flag played more forgivingly, but also had no style, no character. Just a game you turned on, hit play, and finished. Since then, we hadn't really had a track-based racing game, with the closest being maybe Sega Rally Championship 2, which was on roads but at least involved high-performance automobiles. Publisher and developer Video System has come to the rescue, though, with the generically titled but appealingly balanced F-1 World Grand Prix, a game that had a surprisingly complicated journey to the Dreamcast stage. Video System was a small Japanese development and publishing company that began in the mid-1980s making adults-only arcade mahjong games like Lingerie House, before pivoting in the late 80s to vertical scrolling shooters, most distinctly the Sonic Wings series. In 1991, they transitioned from that to a top-down, Japan-only arcade racing game called F-1 Grand Prix, which was ported to the Super Famicom in 1992, and they released some sequel/updates over the next couple years. In 1997, Video System entered into a partnership with a Texas company called Paradigm Entertainment. Paradigm Entertainment began life in 1990 as Paradigm Simulation, which developed technology for training simulators for pilots and ship captains, as well as graphic development for clients as varied as Walt Disney and NASA. Paradigm was contacted by Nintendo in 1994, having drawn their attention with a flight simulator called Hornet, which was built on Silicon Graphics workstations, a company that had become one of Nintendo's top first-party partners. This led to the creation of Nintendo 64 launch title Pilotwings 64, which remains one of the most beloved games on the system for its compelling challenge and its charming arcade personality. Video System and Paradigm collaborated on a fairly middling N64 flight combat sim called Aero Fighters Assault in 1997. In the summer of '98, Paradigm took the point on development of F-1 World Grand Prix for the N64, which was based on the 1997 Formula 1 season. World Grand Prix received a lot of praise for technical accuracy and in-depth car customization and fine-tuning. The teams then began work on a straightforward flight simulator called Harrier 2001. Paradigm was working hard on the development when Video System abruptly stopped communication and funding, and Paradigm ended up filing a lawsuit saying Video System neglected to provide structure for the project, audio materials, or make full payment for development costs, despite the fact that the game was coming along at a good speed. And Paradigm mentioned that these timeframes are extremely narrow because of how fast technology was moving in the late 90s, and because of Video System's failure to meet its obligations, that window had basically closed. Harrier 2001 was dead before arrival. And when you're getting sued for $1 million for not paying your bills to your partner, chances are that partnership is no longer happening. This resulted in the Dreamcast port of F-1 World Grand Prix being newly developed in-house by Video System. The game was based on the 1998 F-1 season and dropped in November of 1999 in Europe and Japan, but thanks to new, fresh copyright issues, took 5 months until the end of April in the year 2000 to release in the US. Video System's version is very similar to Paradigm's, visually and structurally. The original Paradigm version for N64 wasn't a particularly distinctive or visually stunning work, but it was clean, It was mostly normal-looking F1 cars running on sparsely furnished but detailed proper racetracks, without a lot of impediments. The visuals are very nice, better than many for the console, and so the Dreamcast version mostly just looks like the same game, but with some updated sprites and lighting effects. So Video System was capably able to emulate the work of their former partners turned legal opponents. But I didn't know any of that when I fired up F1 World Grand Prix. The only things in my head were how psychotically unpleasant it was to play MONACO Grand Prix, and how bland Flag to Flag looked. And it was, to my great charm, to find that F1 World Grand Prix threaded the needle well between those two games. It not only handles more forgivingly than MGP did, but also has several difficulty assistance settings to let you ease into building the skills needed to operate and compete in the high power and finicky course structure of Formula 1 racing, allowing you to actually play long enough to get used to the rhythms of the game and its control scheme. I turned all assistance on at first and got comfortable, and eventually built up to not even needing them by the 5th or 6th race. MONACO Grand Prix had both mind-bogglingly touchy, exacting controls, a wild lack of hand-holding or guidance, and also ran on a severe time-limit checkpoint restriction that didn't allow you even the slightest grace to learn how to play. It also sports some better aesthetic and stylistic options than the curt, thin Flag to Flag, with atmospheric weather patterns and a fun little post-race animation showing the victors celebrating with champagne. I barely know what MGP's end screen shows, because I only finished one race in 2 hours of playtime, and that was in dead last. It's near impossible to even get there fast enough to beat the arbitrary clock without crashing. I certainly know what the game over sound is. Information about the fate of Video System Company Limited is very hard to come by. Not only do they have a super generic name, but they were basically a Japanese-only company, and so small time that, as far as I can see, they didn't develop or produce another game after F1 World Grand Prix and the demise of Harrier 2001. Paradigm didn't fare much better. In the interim between the two F1 Grand Prix games, they did produce the legendary and oft-mentioned Beetle Adventure Racing for the Nintendo 64, but in June of 2000 they were acquired by Infogrames, and became yet another promising studio developing mediocre licensed games under the Infogrames umbrella. Like Mission Impossible, Operation Surma, and Terminator 3: The Redemption. In 2008, they were sold to THQ and put out the well-liked Stuntman, Ignition. But apparently that game didn't hit THQ's sales numbers, and in the fall of 2008, Paradigm was no more. These are two more companies squashed under the thumb of capitalism, ones that left barely enough of a legacy to even mention here. But in the midst of them coming together and falling apart, they put out a nice little Formula 1 game called F1 World Grand Prix. And that's not nothing. It at least feels like a game that wants you to play it, and wants you to have fun. And if nothing else, allowed me to wipe the taste of the monstrous MONACO Grand Prix out of my mouth. Next time, what's my persona? Well, first I jack your brain, and then I hit you with a big stick.